Now I'll turn it over to Joy Clark, where she'll provide the welcome and introduce our panelists.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joy Clark. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations at Wayne State. I'm also an alum of the university. I have a master's degree from the College of Fine Performing and Communication Arts. And I appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the speakers, and then we will go ahead and start with Teresa. But first, I'd like to welcome Teresa Samarco, who is the Director of Performance Excellence and Quality and Behavioral Health Services at Henry Ford Health Systems. She has both a bachelor's and master's in social work from Wayne State. David Scolati, he's the president of Scolati Wealth Management, and he holds a bachelor's of social work degree from Wayne State. And Mary Jo Upshaw, who's a social entrepreneur, as well as a professor in the School of Social Work and the Mike Ilitch School of Business. And she has a master's of social work from Wayne State University. And if we can start with Teresa talking about her Wayne State story, as well as her career path and how she ended up with a social work degree and then ended up in a non-traditional social work field.
Thank you, Joy. Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for being here today and investing some time and energy in learning about different career paths that might be available with a social work degree. I completed my master's in 1987, so a long time ago, 33 years ago. And I started my career path actually in the clinical world and worked for community mental health. In the time of the late 80s, there were still lots of state psychiatric hospitals, and I worked in a state psychiatric hospital for 9 years. And I enjoyed psychiatry greatly, but became really frustrated in my role as an individual and not being able to change things as much as I wanted them to change. And so I moved to an HMO, actually. And at the HMO, I was there for about 10 years, and I discovered outcome measures and ways of policy management and ways of looking at helping shape the care that people get in a non-traditional way. So there should be standards of care. We can make sure that the care that you get when you go to the doctor's office for whatever condition you have, let's say it's depression, is the same everywhere that you go. And they're looking for the same types of things that are evidence-based and based on the literature. So I also discovered that I had a knack for looking at standards and regulatory compliance. Maybe I should have been an attorney, and turning them into policy and into sort of practical ways of using that information. And so right now I'm a quality director at Henry Ford Health System, and I have under my purview is a freestanding psychiatric hospital, residential addiction center, and outpatient clinics. And really the job is to look at things from a system perspective, to look at care from a global standpoint, and try to ensure that we're doing all the things that we're supposed to be doing and that we can do them better and improve what we're doing, because as human beings, you know, we are geared to make mistakes. I mean, it just is who we are. And so if we can develop ways of delivering care that are foolproof, that you can't make mistakes, that's what I do, and that's what my team does. It's a very intense job, but I love it. And I'm very happy to be here. So, and welcome any kind of questions anyone might have.
Thank you, Teresa. David, do you want to go ahead and speak, and then we can follow up with questions when Mary Jo is complete?
Sure. Thank you, Joy.
Thanks.
Nice to be with all of you today. I'll try to remember to look up in the camera instead of looking at myself, which is one of those Zoom skills I'm trying to develop. My path was fairly untraditional, as Joy mentioned, and it basically started when I was 16 and I went to treatment for alcoholism and drug abuse as an adolescent. And I got sober then and have remained sober ever since. And so through that process of dealing with all those things when I was a teenager, my academic career was not real illustrious. It was not good. And so I was not on a traditional path in terms of where I was going to go to college. So I ended up, through the course of graduating high school and moving forward, going to Henry Ford Community College. And I started more on a business track. I was taking accounting and business classes. But through the process of entering recovery and dealing with all the wonderful people that helped me move in that direction, I became interested in substance use disorders, adolescent treatment, therapy, various parts of the social work, psychiatry, psychology world. And so by the time I got done at Henry Ford and I had gotten an associate's degree there in business, and I was deciding which direction to go for my undergrad, I found out about the Wayne State School of Social Work. And honestly, I didn't research schools of social work at all. I decided I wanted to go to Wayne. Wayne had a school of social work. I thought, it's Wayne. I'm sure I can get in, right? Because it's not some Ivy League school, and I was hopeful that they would accept me. Little did I know that the School of Social Work was the #1 school of social work in the country. So with absolute ignorance, I just applied. And I got back a letter from CC Dumbrigi, who was the admissions person at the time. And she basically said, your story is compelling and we want you to be here, but we don't have a spot for you in the fall. If you can wait until January, we would be glad to have you. And so I was very grateful. And I just did another term in community college, and then I transferred to Wayne. And I really enjoyed my time at Wayne. I'm still in touch with a lot of my social work friends from the school. And the professors and the faculty there were wonderful. And it was just a really great experience. The only thing I wish maybe Wayne would have had at that time was an undergrad residential dorm, type of situation, because I think I would have enjoyed it even more if I could have lived on campus like you can now. So during the course of this time that I was going through my educational process, my high school economics teacher reached out to me, and he and I had stayed in touch. When I was a senior, he was a new teacher. So we weren't that far apart in age, and we remained friends after I graduated. And he called me, and he had an opportunity with a broker who was at Dean Witter at the time, which became Morgan Stanley, to work for him on a part-time basis. And he was looking for someone to do some very specific things for him a couple of days a week. So I started there in January of 95, and I graduated Wayne in May of 96. So I was doing this 2-day-a-week job in the financial world, as well as going to the School of Social Work and doing my curriculums and all the other things that we do. And by the time I graduated in May of 96, I had developed a very good relationship with him and with the firm. And they offered to bring me into their sales training program and educate me in the financial world and get me licensed as a broker. So I ended up graduating in May of 96 and going in that direction, even though it wasn't the direction that I planned. And it was a very exciting path. I spent a month at the World Trade Center, which is certainly a memorable thing now for me after 9/11. And I went into production in December of 96. And then in December of 1998, my mentor at the time, who had been in the business about almost 27 years at that point, he and I left that firm and opened an independent investment advisory firm in Livonia, which is still there. And I was with him until 2011, when he and I parted ways, and I opened this firm in January of 2012, and I'm still here today. I find that the skills I learned in social work are very applicable to what I do now. A lot of what I do is managing expectations, keeping people on track, helping them with a plan, doing all the things that are necessary to ultimately achieve whatever their goals happen to be. And the biggest thing I do is keep people from hurting themselves. You know, a lot of times people's psychological response to financial issues and other matters, their initial response is not the right one. And, you know, as our previous speaker was mentioning, we're programmed to make mistakes in some ways, and we need a process to help us not do that. And that's what I help people create and then implement, is that process. So I found that my skills in the social work world have transferred nicely to what I do here. And, you know, it's been a big benefit. In the meantime, I'm also involved in an organization in Western Wayne County in Plymouth called GrowthWorks Incorporated. And GrowthWorks was actually where I went to aftercare when I came home from primary treatment. I've been on the board almost 20 years, and I became president of the board last year in 2019. And so GrowthWorks is the Western Wayne County Case Management Organization. And when Ed McNamara was the county executive, one of the things they did was they restructured the social services area, especially in the area of juvenile justice. And they created case management organizations who would manage the kids that are adjudicated or come into the judicial system through their process and get them whatever services they need, and then answer to the court for providing those services. So if kids need sex offender treatment, drug and alcohol abuse treatment, or family counseling, all those different types of things, GrowthWorks provides a case manager to help them get all those services and then navigate the court system, answer to the court, and ultimately, hopefully, get them independently on their way and successful. So that connection has also allowed me to keep, you know, my hand in the social work world and to remain committed and connected to that part of my life. So it was great to hear from Joy, and great to reconnect with Wayne State. And I'm happy to speak with you today and look forward to talking more.
Thank you, David.
Welcome.
Mary Jo, are you ready to speak?
Sure.
Thank
It's so
you.
interesting to hear the stories of my colleagues. I just love it. So I too have had an atypical social work career, but I think atypical might be the new career. So I don't know, we might have to quit using that. So I always encourage social workers to think about using themselves in non-typical fields of practice. So I've been in the field a long time. I'm a second generation social worker. My mother was a social worker, and we started a business together for social workers over 30 years ago in Kansas City, where I originally am from. And she was the true entrepreneur because it was her financial capital that she put up. But I was a young social work student actually at the time. And we worked together. We grew that business. It was a social work staffing agency for social workers. So we sent social workers out across fields of practice in healthcare, mental health, EAP work, child welfare, school-based services, corrections, and they worked in temporary positions and in full-time staffing. And we did that in Kansas City, and we were really fortunate to grow it into a large business with multiple offices across the country. And I'm proud to say that that business is still in operation after 30 years, which is a feat that few businesses are able to reach. And so, and over those years, we employed just thousands of social workers. And so, you know, we became an employer and a real supporter of social work and moving social workers into atypical positions. It was one of the things we always advocated for in our practice. And we're able to demonstrate, you know, how effective social work is across many different areas. And so that business is still in operation, but after 20 years of leading that business, and everything I know about business, I know from actually running a business. So everything from, you know, how to understand financials and manage your financials, to raising capital, to developing offices, to training and hiring staff, to developing quality assurance. I mean, it gets really real, and David probably knows this, when you have to make payroll, like when you are the generator of income that employs others, it gets very real. And so I really enjoyed that, but I also went back and got an MBA along the line as well. So I have an MSW MBA. And after numerous years of working in the business, I went to work for a nonprofit, or what I like to call a for impact organization. I don't think we should define ourselves by what we don't do, generate profit. And nonprofits actually have to generate profit. So it's a misnomer to even call ourselves a nonprofit. But I went to work for one of the real originators of social enterprise and social innovation, and that's Goodwill Industries. Goodwill is about a $6 billion organization across the nation and across the world, but I went to work for a $60 million Goodwill. And all of the income that we generated, that $60 million, came from those of you who donate your gently used, clothing items and household items and give those to Goodwill. And we repurpose those into income that serves our mission-related portfolio. And the Goodwill that I worked at, we had 27 retail stores. We really understood the retail process and how to generate our own earned revenue so that we could run our mission-related programs. And I was the leader of financial services for our portfolio of asset building and income strengthening programs for low to moderate income individuals and households. So I was the CEO of a consumer credit counseling program during the housing downturn, the housing bubble burst. So that was really critically important work. And I did a lot of policy work as well as leading the team of financial counselors that were helping people stave off foreclosure. I ran a big tax site. We did 1,800 returns a year. And David works with a lot of high net worth individuals, but when you work with folks who are low to moderate income, their taxes are very complicated. And I don't know if you know, but the Earned Income Tax Credit lifts more people out of poverty than any other policy program we have in this nation. So you don't think about social work and tax time, but tax time is a critical program area really to build assets for low-income families and marginalized communities. And then I also ran a micro enterprise development program where I helped other very small micro entrepreneurs. These are entrepreneurs that are usually self-employed individuals, many immigrants and persons who are shut out of the formal labor market. I helped them think about formalizing whatever skill they had into a business and help them raise capital and help them learn business skills and learn how to market their products and services so that they could employ themselves. Business is so important to our economy. It's most of our new job growth doesn't come from large corporations. It comes from very small businesses. And now with the COVID crisis, we're seeing just what a challenge it is for small businesses, particularly Black and Brown-owned businesses. So it's a critical place for social workers to be. And now I teach at the School of Social Work and the School of Business here at Wayne State. I teach social entrepreneurship. I have a class for social workers. I teach impact investing. And I teach macro classes for social workers, social work leadership, and program planning and intervention.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call on Kim Easley, who's going to do a reminder for individuals to put their information into the chat box. Kim, would you like to talk about that?
Yes, please. Thank you, Joy. And thank you to our panelists. Those stories were very great and inspirational to non-traditional tracks of social work. I'd like to just remind everyone, if you would enter your name, your major, concentration, and your desired career path into the chat box. And then we can have our panelists kind of address those desired career paths.
And I can start with Teresa. I have a question. I know that when we, were preparing for this and talking about this, that I know that you talked that you do a lot of mentoring. Can you talk a little bit about when you work with individuals that have just graduated from college or recent graduates, mentorship that you've done with them on career planning and really how to be thoughtful about what your skill set is and how to align that with your interests and just sort of how to make that into a career so that you're not just sort of stumbling and thinking about this stuff after you graduate, but or when you're in the field, but just some of the thoughtfulness that goes into that.
Yeah, sure. So my daughter actually went to Wayne State and is an MSW as well. She's in the class of 2012. And while she was in school, I had the opportunity to meet many of her classmates. I mean, it was such a rewarding experience for me. I know for her too, of course, but for me in particular, because to be able to see social work and the thought process that goes into planning and thinking about how to change and help, assist, and guide it's really rewarding. And so the folks that were in her life had interests in hospice, in mental health, in policy development. So it was really all across the board. And there are at least 4 of her friends that graduated in that 2012 class that I'm still in contact with, and they ask me questions and reach out when they're stuck, let's say in work, or they don't know what to do, or they don't know how to handle a situation. And I really think that it would have been very nice if my 25-year-old self had somebody like me to reach out to someone that had some experience and could help guide the way. Because one thing I know for sure is that nobody knows for sure what's going to happen next. And one of the biggest skills that you could learn in your career is how to solve a problem, how to solve a complex problem. It's not having the answers, it's understanding how to research and how to come up with the answers. And that's really what I like to focus on. So I don't know if that helps or if anyone has any other questions about it, but.
Well, thank you, Teresa. We're letting, I've tried to type in the box, but unfortunately it's not letting me. But if anybody has any questions, any students or recent graduates or alumni, you can go ahead and type them in the box, or you can use your raise hand feature. David, would you talk a little bit about, I know that you said that you're the first part of, attending Wayne State and, you stumbled into that, but that as you started to get into your career, you realized that working in financials was, where your strengths were. Is there some advice that you would give to students where they're early on in their career, where they can, sort of be thoughtful in that path? I know that sometimes it is a stumbling. I started in politics and now here I am in alumni relations, but that's sort of where my strengths lie. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I guess my only piece of advice in that area would be to always be open to whatever opportunities come your way, even if it's not what originally, was part of your plan. And look around you and see who are the people that that you admire professionally and otherwise, and talk to them about how they got to where they are. See if there are opportunities for you to get closer to them and learn from them. The biggest blessing of my career was being hired by the person that I was in this business. I wasn't planning on ending up here. He was looking for someone part-time. It came from a relationship with a previous teacher. So again, if I look back over the course of my life, the path that my life has taken has all been shaped by the people that I met along the way, who I didn't just pass by, who I grabbed onto and tried to learn from. And so when I started at Dean Witter, there was a previous relationship that my mentor had with another broker. And so they had partner desks. So on one end of the office was his desk and the other end was mine. So I go in there and I'm starting to do my job and trying to figure out what all this stuff means. And it probably took about 3 or 4 months for me to realize that I was sitting across the room from one of 10,000 people that worked for that company and did what he did, but who was in the top 100 of the firm. So all of a sudden, I am literally sitting across from a top percentile person in that job, watching every interaction he has with his clients, watching every decision that he makes, talking with him about those decisions, and being able to learn from that and pull on it later, in my career. And all I did was pay attention, and ended up in the right place. So, there's a lot of luck in life. I mean, a lot of who you get connected to and things happening to you that are good and or bad. But I also think we can help the luck by paying attention and trying to connect with people as best we can in whatever area it is. And opportunities will be created by doing that.
Thank you very much, David. Mary Jo, will you talk a little bit? I know that you said that you had started the business. You were your first entrepreneurship venture was with your mother and running the business. When did you know that that is what you wanted to do and that that was your passion and that tied to just what your skill set was and what you're interested in?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It was my big existential crisis that everyone didn't think like social workers. I mean, I was raised by a mom. I'm the youngest of 6, and my mom went back to college and started college. Her father died really when she was young, 17, and she was an architectural student at the time and had to come back. This is before we had policies again, and we had programs for student loans. So she had to get pulled out of college, went into the Navy. This is in the 40s. So my mom's a real trailblazer. Wow. And went into the Navy, met my father, had 6 kids, went and got a BSW and an MSW after having 6 kids. She was like a gray-haired mom, with the BSWs at the height of the 1970s, when we were really politically active. So I learned so much from my mother. Like all of her friends and her student colleagues would be there and they were planning protest and doing advocacy work. She worked really early on in mental patients' rights. This is during the time when we had a lot of state psychiatric hospitals, and that was the only kind of level of care. And these group of social workers were trying to get people back into the community for care versus being institutionalized. So I really learned about social work at the kitchen table with my mother. And it was my great, existential crisis that everyone didn't think like social workers do. So I've got it in my DNA, probably just, and my sister's a social worker. I'm really steeped in social work. And for those of you, I've been monitoring the chat box, and a lot of you are like psych majors and other majors, and you're thinking about social work. This is such a noble profession. We do similar things in mental health, but social work has this unique person and environment perspective where we're always thinking about the individual in their environment. And, I just can't think of another profession. We're very value oriented and very ethically driven. And I absolutely love social work. I'm proud to be an NASW member, sit on the board of the National Association of Social Workers. I've done that nationally. I'm doing it now on the state level. I saw one of the students said they'd like to work in animal assisted activities. And guess what? We do that in social work. NASW even has a specialty practice field for that, for folks who are using animals and other forms of non-traditional therapy to reach folks that otherwise are, really difficult to reach. And so it's just a beautiful profession. There's so much to do in this profession. We're so diverse. So I'm really excited about the folks that are on. A lot seem to be undergraduate folks that are really thinking about the field. And a lot of people, you don't know about social work. Like it's usually a professor or someone else that tells you, hey, you should think about social work. You sound like a social worker. So, but we're a very storied profession. And we have another thing I really love about social work is we have a really strong social justice, and advocacy part of what we do. We're the largest mental health profession, but we're also, right in our code of ethics is our mission to serve the most vulnerable people. And we're seeing that now, right? In the COVID crisis and the racial justice issues. And so this is such a noble profession, and the work that we do is so critically important. So I'm really thrilled. I don't even remember what your question was, but did I answer it?
You did, and your passion for social work and social justice came through, so I appreciate that. And it's interesting, I should say that this is the first time we usually do this in Tierney Alumni House on campus and in person, and it's usually, it's nice, the energy of the speakers and the students, it's a really connection. So it's interesting to do this digitally, and so I could see your passion come through, so I appreciate that. So now it's the time for students, if you have any questions. This is really informal. So if you want to, unmic yourself and ask your question, if you want to put it in the chat box, if you want to raise your hand, all of the speakers are very willing to answer anything that you have to ask them about, their career path, their Wayne State story, what they're currently doing now. Any question is a good question.
Mary Jo, I also thought that the animal assisted activities and therapies was very interesting because I'm a animal lover myself. Would it be okay for you to follow up with Stacy, and also Stacy, is okay for Mary Jo to follow up with you with any additional resources that would help her on that path?
Yeah, certainly. She can reach out to me. I'm in the Wayne State system. Just put my name in and you'll find my email. But just want to share a little. My sister is a social worker too. I grew up in Kansas and I grew up riding horses. And so when I was at Goodwill, we had a program called CHAPS, and it was a program, equine therapy. And that program worked with at-risk high schoolers who really didn't respond to other programs well, but really bonded with the horses. It's an expensive model to run because you have to run the stable and the horses and take care of them, and then also provide therapy. But man, if you can put those two things together, they're just so powerful because animals can really break through for a lot of folks that don't respond to traditional talk therapy. And I just think it's a really passionate thing, and I will try to connect her. So there's also a great program. It's in Detroit. It's not equine therapy, but it's called Detroit Horsepower. And I bring their founder in, David Silver, to talk about the social innovation, but he uses horses to work with youth development. And he's done some amazing things in Detroit. They were an upstart that started within the last few years. He's a former Teach for America alumni, and Teresa will appreciate this, but he's got such great outcome measures. I bring him in to talk about how did they measure the impact and the outcomes for clients of the work that they do around youth development. So.
Yeah, so knowing if something is working is a beautiful thing. So I agree with that. Understanding if what you're doing is actually making a difference and learning how to do that. It's very rewarding and satisfying to know that there's some evidence that what you're doing is making an impact for sure.
So we have a question in the chat box, and Teresa, I'll start with you, and then we can go to David and then to Mary Jo in that order. But because of background noise, it's in the chat. But can you talk a little bit about what college did not prepare for you? What did not prepare you for your career or teach you that didn't prepare you for your career? I guess to sort of back up that a little bit, actually why we started this series was that students get a lot of, theory and practical information like that thrown to the, taught to them in school, but a lot of the soft skills like interviewing, working with others, some of that stuff that I know that you all have talked about, conflict resolution, management, financials. But so can you talk a little bit about some of those soft skills or the things that weren't taught to you in your, what you didn't learn in college?
That's a really great question. And I would say that what I am doing now, I learned none of it in social work school, none of it. The background and foundation, yes. So the background and foundation of what it is to be a social worker, as Mary Jo mentioned, our ethics and our values. For me, it was learning the basics of mental health and psychiatry, and then taking it then to another place. I didn't learn anything about quality assurance or improvement work or making sure that it's safe in hospitals for patients to get care. And how do you do that? And how do you make sure people feel safe so they can speak up when something goes wrong and work better as a team? All of those types of things are critical. And yet I didn't learn any of that, at least not in my education. And so I will say I'm a lifelong learner, and I can only stay in a job 3 to 5 years because I want the next thing. I want to learn the next thing. And so my advice would be to follow your curiosity, and let the river of life take you on your journey, and see where it takes you. But I mean, that would be my advice.
I love that advice. That's perfect. David, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
I would just support exactly, what was just said. I think that we all take statistics, right? So that helped a little bit in terms of some numbers in there. But, I think in general, the process of education is part learning, material, but the other part of it is learning how to be a self-teacher, how to study things, how to go about learning about something, how to go about implementing what you learn. And so that's not going to necessarily get taught to you in a textbook. That's through experience and trial and error. Trying something, it doesn't work as well. What am I going to do next time to do that better? We could all memorize every part of an automobile, but we would not have the skill to take the car apart and put it back together, knowing all those parts, And I found that out in the financial world quickly, in that when you become licensed as a broker, and I should have mentioned, I'm not actually licensed as a broker anymore. My firm is a registered investment advisor. So we are a fiduciary. We're bound by a fiduciary standard. And, the way the brokerage world works is the self-regulatory organization, which is called FINRA. That's who licenses brokers. And that FINRA answers to the SEC. The way my world works is I answer directly to the SEC. They're the regulator that I'm in contact with. So my point is, when I went into the brokerage world, I had to get licensed and I had to take this test. And passing the test does not mean you know what to do with money. Knowing what all the different asset classes are and what options are and how these things work and how the math works does not mean that you actually know how to implement those things and make money. I learned that from my mentor. So, my advice would be to again, look for those relationships and opportunities. And I think that's why we have practicums and field placements, because the school knows that everything isn't in the book. You've got to get out there in the field and experience it. And I had 2 wonderful field placements that were very helpful. And I think, this is not new information, but for me, it's just really about learning how to be a self-learner and understanding that I'm not going to really understand all the aspects of whatever it is I'm trying to do until I've done it for a while and learned about it. And I think Mary Jo said that she learned a lot about business by running a business, not by getting a degree and then all of a sudden that allows you to know how to run the business. You just have to do it and figure out when you make mistakes and when you miss things, and then correct them and keep learning and moving forward. So, but otherwise, I'd say the school prepared me very well. But there's just things that it's not going to prepare you for. And that's the stuff that really is what's going to determine your success over time.
Very true. Thank you so much, David. Mary Jo, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'll just affirm what my colleagues have said. I'll give an example. When I started as the CEO of a consumer credit counseling program, I hadn't worked in that field before. And how I even got to that is I was transitioning from business into this nonprofit world, and I was in a new geographic area, and I, looked at a foundation and some of the principles of a private foundation, a family that did a lot of work in the community. And I went to him and I said, tell me the 5 most innovative people in this town, because I want to go talk to them, because I'm like Teresa, I get bored easily after a while and I want the next challenge. And so that was the best networking thing. In this era of all of our online stuff, we still find, our jobs and our opportunities through these personal contacts that we make. David's story tells that perfectly. But I went and I asked to talk to these innovative leaders. At the top of the list was the person I ended up working for at Goodwill, who I like to describe as like part Santa Claus, part hippie. A wildly successful man. He took over the Goodwill when it was about a $5 million Goodwill and turned it into a $60 million Goodwill. And on his business card, he was our CEO, but his business card officially said he was the chief storyteller, and he's the best leader I've ever worked for. He was just amazingly, inspiring. And I told him, hey, do you have any work? Like, I want to gain some experience, working and helping do some resource development for any groups that are in the community that are doing like transformative work. And so he put me to work helping a group of grassroots organizers who had done some great work in trying to lower the recidivism rate. I'd never worked in corrections before in my life. I had to teach myself what was going on in corrections. And you start with the people most affected by it, like you. I also go to the literature, always go to the literature and see what's happening. Like Teresa said, it's so important to understand and have a research base and know how to analyze problems, but also talk to the people most affected by a problem. They're the experts in a problem. And I just schooled myself on that. And then that turned into, I was able to help this grassroots organization get their funding together. And they've grown tremendously. They've become a best practice model across the country for lowering recidivism. And then that wedged me into a job at Goodwill. And I had never worked really, in this financial capability world. But again, I went back to the research and I went to the innovation. Who's doing evidence-based practice? Who's doing the most innovative things? I want to understand what they're doing and, looking at that. So I've always just put myself in. I think what Teresa said about being a lifelong learner is so important. Like, we're never going to know all the technical knowledge. You have to keep reading. I read probably 5 journal articles a day, and that's just how fast the technology is changing in any field, and you have to keep up with it. So just put yourself out there. And I just love to learn, and I'm really driven by how can I make a difference in people's lives. And we don't have all the resources, so you really have to use your resources wisely, and you really have to think about the evidence of what works and what doesn't work, and marry that with social innovation. So, and I think that's what we're teaching now in social work. We're teaching critical thinking skills, we're teaching evidence-based practice, we're teaching you how to think like a social scientist, and do that with, the empathy and a human heart. So it's a good time to be in social work again.
Thank you.
Those were awesome, good points. Lifelong learning, get practice in what you're wanting to do, mentorship. So all great tips to do that. For one of our first entries into the chat box was someone's major is undecided, but their passion is social work and working within community health. Is there some advice or tips that you can identify for our guests to identify their major, to connect with that passion? Any one of you can answer, or all of you?
I mean, I can go. I guess I would say I would need to know more. I think that it's important to really think about what it is that interests you, what it is that makes you excited. Because any work that you do, this is not an easy field to be in. There are a lot of problems that need to be solved, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so I would just advise you to pick a path that excites you and that you want to learn more about and that you're curious about, or that drives you. Something that you want to wake up every day so that you can put a dent in. Other than, if you don't do that, then I don't know how engaging it would be. So I guess it's up to you to sort of decide for yourself on what that means to you. I'm very, very happy I got an MSW. It's a very, very diverse field, as Mary Jo said. There are people in all sorts of roles in having an MSW. And so, I mean, all the way from senators, right, to investment, to quality, to all kinds of things. And so, you know, you have the ability to bill Medicare, and you can have an outpatient practice. Not all master's level providers can do that. And so it's just very versatile. And so I would strongly support, of course I'm biased, but I would strongly support social work as a choice.
Want me to go? One of the things that came to mind for me is not just what you want to do, but maybe there's something you want to do, but in a different format than it's being done now. You know, that's where the entrepreneurial part of it comes in. And what Therese just mentioned about having the ability to bill Medicare, I mean, that puts you in a position to be an entrepreneur and a small business person inherently with that opportunity. So there might be something that you experienced in a field placement, or there might be somebody that you know that's in a certain line of work that you're interested in, but you may find a different way of doing that same opportunity that appeals to you more and makes you happier every day when you go to work. I remember prior to separating from my mentor, I went through a period where I was wondering if, you know, I really liked this business as much as I thought I did, or maybe, you know, the way that we were doing things there in comparison to what I wanted to do. And so it wasn't 6 months after I had launched this firm and was on my own that I was working harder than I'd ever worked before. And I was also happier than I had ever been working. You know, I was working a lot. The first year I worked 7 days a week, you know, morning till evening. I wasn't doing triathlon at that time. There was no time for anything like that. It was all about the business. And, you know, that's fine. When you're starting a business and you're an entrepreneur, that's what you have to do. You got to put in the sweat equity. And, you know, I don't have to work that hard now. But I didn't even think about it. It didn't seem difficult to me. I was in love with the business. I was in love with what I was doing. I was having a wonderful time, onboarding my clients from my previous firm and moving forward. And so what I figured out was, it wasn't that I didn't like doing this, and it wasn't that I didn't like some of the things that we were doing. It was that I didn't like doing it with my mentor second guessing me and causing me to second guess myself. You know, and that's no knock on him. It was just, we had been together long enough, and it was time for me to move forward and do it on my own. And so once I was doing it on my own, it became a totally different experience. So again, it wasn't a different job, wasn't a different client base. It was just a different way of doing it. And that changed the way it felt when I came to work every day.
We actually have a question in the chat box from Mason. It says, "Hi everyone, my name is Mason. I was wondering if the speakers could answer a question I've been pondering. In my sophomore year now and on track for my BSW, should I go straight through to get my MSW? And wait, can I do with my BSW to work my way up to an MSW, if that makes sense?" Mary Jo, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, the good thing about having a BSW is now we have advanced standing, so it'll only take you 1 year to get your MSW, and you have a time limit on that. The Council of Social Work Education, don't quote me on this, it's either 5 years or 7 years. So you have that window period where you have a BSW that you can go into our advanced standing program. These are national standards that are set by the Council of Social Work Education. So this is every school of social work. And you can knock out that MSW in a year versus 2 years. So that might be intriguing to you. It used to be that folks would say, go out and get some practice experience, and come back in when you know what you want to do. But I think it's personal choice now. There'll be a lot of jobs you can't apply for without an MSW, because that's really our terminal degree in social work. As Therese said, with an MSW, there's the wealth of direct service and clinical positions. After you get a clinical license, you have vendorship, and you can start your own practice, and you can bill off, third-party vendors, that kind of thing. So I think if, getting an MSW needs to be on your bucket list for sure. It's just when it works for you, when it works for your whole life needs, your family needs, your finance needs, all of those things you would have to determine. So There are some organizations that'll pay for your MSW, like if you're going to go into child welfare, so that might be a factor as well. So I think talking to our advisors would be really good. We have amazing advisors at the School of Social Work on the MSW level, and going in and talking with them and the admissions folks would be beneficial, so they can, you know, guide you on all of those kind of variables and decision points you might need to make. So
I say go for it.
Me too.
It's only a year. If you have the financial ability and you have the time, you're already in the student mode, right? You're already you got the patterns established and you can just rock it through. I just think in my own experience, you know, there was that time in my life when I had that time, ability, financial, otherwise, to focus on school and get through it. And once that period passes, it doesn't usually come back. It's, you know, a lot harder when as an adult with children and a family, you decide that you're going to go back and get a degree. So, you know, without knowing your situation and not trying to, infringe on your right to self-determination, I would say go for it, get it done. And especially with the accelerated program in only a year is nothing, you know, so.
And when the economy is bad, it's a good time to be in school.
Great time to be in school.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Can I say something about the earlier question around community mental health? I just want to tell a little story about one of our inspirational social worker alumni, one of our alumnus. So Alice Thompson is a graduate of Wayne State School of Social Work, a very proud graduate. And in the 1970s, she was looking around and she didn't really see her community, African Americans, being served well by the mental health system. And she started the National Association of Black Social Workers, which has a chapter here in Detroit, very strong chapter, but they're national across the country. And she was one of the leading founders, and she started an organization called Black Family Development. We actually placed social workers there. And that was out of her experience of like, I don't see my community being served, and there's something that I can offer. And that organization is like a $30 million. I only talk about revenue because with revenue gives you some ability to do things like to serve people more. It's not like revenue for revenue's sake, but 30 million is pretty big for a nonprofit or for impact organizations. Most are, you know, under $1 million. And so she started that, and that organization is going strong after, you know, 30 plus years, 40 years now, and has an amazing reputation for all the leading and innovative things that they've done. So if you're passionate about mental health and you're passionate about, I don't know what community mental health means to you, but if it means serving your community that you feel is not being served well, this is the field for you. You can do so many wonderful things. So, and social work, we really value diversity. I mean, it's a cornerstone of our profession to value diversity. It's, you know, in our code of ethics, it's in the way we approach the work. We still have to do a better job of it. So, most people in social work look like me, white women, but we're trying to get better at that. And we need, you know, people coming in that represent different viewpoints and represent different communities and different life experiences. So.
I just want to mention GrowthWorks is one of the 5 CMOs, case management organizations in Wayne County, that I'm involved in. Black Family Development is another. So we are, constituents with Black Family Development, and know Alice pretty well, and pretty amazing woman. So, small world, right?
She's actually just been nominated for an alumni award by the dean for the School of Social Work. So we're very excited, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that that will work out. So we appreciate that. So we're just coming up on 4:30, which it's been about an hour. So we're right at our time. So we just really appreciate everybody taking the time this afternoon to hop onto this call. If any of the students or alumni on the call have any follow-up questions, I know that when you registered, you had Kim Easley's information, so we can go ahead and put you in contact with the speakers. If you have any additional questions or, wanted to connect with them, I'm sure they would be happy to make that connection. I just want to take a moment to thank Kim Easley and Cam Morris and Deidre Corbett Turner from Kim Easley works in our office in alumni relations and works with career services and with the School of Social Work. So we're glad to have her here. And then Cam and Deidre are in special events and services, and we're able to go ahead and have this Zoom call for us this afternoon. So we appreciate all their hard work.
Thank you.
And again, we thank you all for joining us, and have a good day.
Thank you for having us.